Have you ever just like gone out for like most of the day and then proceed to start recording something because you're like just really juiced, really pumped to do that? That's me today. Hi everybody, this is that manga dude here with another episode of FVI, also known as First Volume Impressions. Today is a special one because it's going to be a one shot, or I guess a collection, as some might say, instead of a volume one. So this is kind of going to be like a review slash should you pick this up or should you not. As per usual, like, comment, favorite, subscribe, and now let's get into the video. So the second volume of the FVI is going to be quite the doozy because it is a collection of stories throughout a very storied franchise in both manga and anime, with a career of over 50 years. So let's just get right into it. Lupin III. Thank you for enjoying my rendition of one of the openings. I believe it's the 1978 opening. Don't take my word for that, though. So, Lupin III is a classic manga by Monkey Punch. Came out originally in 1967 and has had two different manga series, or two different mainline manga series, with a new one that just recently came out, which I think is an isekai, which is weird and mind-blowing, but you know, here we are in life. Has multiple anime series. I would argue that the anime is more popular than the manga because the anime has, like 5 different parts, I think. Yeah, and he always changes his suit color, which I think is always funny. So I believe this is the part 2 because the first one I believe is the green suit, and then the second one is the red. So this is Lupin III: Greatest Heist. It was published by Seven Seas recently, I believe in January. Could have been in February. I might be wrong. It is a nice release. So we're gonna go right into the FVI. So, looking over the cover and the spine, this is a hardcover, so it's not like your typical softcover books that you get from manga. It is a really nice production quality across the board. I really like the hardcover, and I really like the font that they have here. It's a really nice yellow, which I don't know if that really comes out in like the lighting, but yeah, you can kind of see it here. And like it just has like a nice feel to it. I definitely feel, I will say, I don't know if it's just my copy, it might be multiple copies, but for mine, it did feel weird to read because it felt like I was like cracking open something that I shouldn't have. It makes like I don't know if I can do it now, but the noise it makes, yeah. Do you hear that? It's probably too low, but yeah, it has like a cracking noise, and I don't know if that's a bad or good or bad thing. It's probably a bad thing, but just something to keep in mind when purchasing this is that it might have that cracking, so I don't know how long it will last as a book. But yeah, just something to keep in mind. Alright, so now that we're done talking about the cover, let's start talking about the characters. There is, I would say, 5 main characters that typically are in Lupin III media, and as well as in this manga. So let's start with the first guy, of course, Lupin III. He is a master thief, a kind of a comedian, a total goofball, but he's really good at his job. He's really sneaky, he's really smart, and he's really good at figuring out like traps and puzzles. So just genuinely just a funny guy. I think in the short stories that they chose for this specific manga, he doesn't come off as much of a playboy as he does in some of the anime series, but I think that's maybe for the better. I think he's genuinely a pretty interesting character in this. I like him a lot. After that, I'm gonna go with, let's start with, what's his name? Jegan. So Jegan is one of Lupin's partners. He is the man in the hat, very cool, very calm, very collected. He's like the gun guy. Yeah, I like him a lot. I think he has some pretty cool, interesting stories within this book, and I hope to see more if we happen to get more Lupin III. After that, we got Fujikomine. She is the one of the female protagonists, or I guess deuteragonist, or whatever you want to call it. But she's super cool. She's like another like super stealthy thief. She uses her like femme fataleness in both ways. Like, she's a really good assassin, but also just really good at stealing things. She has great characterization within this manga, and I actually really like her a lot. And just genuinely just such a fun character to watch, both in the book and on screen. After that, we got Goemon, which is like your standard Japanese samurai character. He's quiet and calm in the anime, but I will say his characterization as this was, I would say, jarring. It was kind of interesting because, like, in certain stories he's a goofball like everybody else, but in certain other stories he's that, like, cool and collected, stick to the law and balance and ethics of things. So it was really weird to see such a difference between certain stories, especially within this own book. And last but not least, Zenigata, also known as the Interpol police guy. He is like just an absolute goofball, and he's actually not bad at his job. Like, you would think that, like, with the main character being a master thief and all that stuff, that they would have a cop or like a police character who isn't very good at his job, but in actuality Zenigata is actually, like, not bad. He does manage to catch Lupin sometimes, and I say the word sometimes in a nice way because, like, yeah, it's not often, but it does happen. But overall, I think the characters in this manga were really fun. I think they have a nice dynamic with one another. They really bounce off of each other quite often. I think Lupin, Goemon, Jegan, and Fujiko make a pretty good team. They're not really a team per se, but they do work together often. And of course, Zenigata is a really good, like, antagonist. Just like a nice comic relief, very funny, very great. Love them all. Yeah, so that's gonna be it for the characters. Let's move on to the story or the writing. Okay, so I'm going to take some liberty with explaining the stories because I actually received some feedback, and I think it'll work better that I don't try to spoil much about what happens in this. So I will try my best, but just in case, if you don't want to hear absolutely anything and you want to go into this blind, I would just avoid this section here. So, as the name suggests, Greatest Heists, it's going to be a variety of stories pulled from both of the manga series that Lupin III has, and it's very interesting to read it because it feels like each story is independent from one another, so you can really read this book however you want, because there is a rhyme and a reason. I would say that, of course, like, the publisher really was, like, picking and choosing what they wanted, but I will say it doesn't feel super cohesive. As I was reading it, it felt like some parts were like, oh, I really wish that was earlier in the manga so that I would have, like, gotten more origin story or characterization for a character, or just, like, stuff like that, because, like, there will be times where some stories will have all of the characters in it. It'll have Lupin, it'll have Jegan, it'll have Fujiko, it'll have Goemon, and it'll have Zenigata, and sometimes it'll just be one of them, and, like, which is fine, right? But when you have an origin story, like the middle of the story, but you already showed that character off earlier in the book, it gets kind of weird because you're like, wait, why am I getting his origin story now? And it's hard to tell, like, where things are supposed to take place in terms of a timeline, which, once again, is not bad, but it does give it a weird sense of kind of all over the place-ness, I think is the best way to say it. Like, you never really know where or, like, when something is supposed to take place, but you can kind of, like, guess. But it is important to note that they are not in order. So if you're somebody who likes, like, consistency or, like, a very easy timeline to follow, this is definitely not something you should check out. Now, in terms of the writing, I would say the writing is very much of its time. There is a lot of things, I would say, that have not aged the best. But I would also say there are things that are, like, just very funny, like, and what you'd expect out of a comedy series. Like, there's really funny parts. There are parts where I definitely laughed out loud. There are sections where there are fourth wall breaks, and fourth wall breaks always get me laughing. So I think this manga is written very well, especially for how old it is. It's unexpectedly funny for something that's over 50 years old. And I think that's something that people can look forward to when reading this specific volume. Or this specific, I guess, collection of stories across the universe, as some might say. Now, we've talked about the story, we've talked about the writing. Let's talk about the visuals, because this is, I would say, the make it or break it for this specific manga series. Okay, so you might be wondering yourself, why did I say it's make it or break it? Well, I think Monkey Punch is a good artist in some aspects, but I do think that some of the issues that I do have with the art may be chalked up to bad scans, because how old it is, like, it could be really hard to find these like specific volumes or these specific like pages. But I'd like to say that the character designs are really great, but I don't think they're translated well within the stories that they chose. I think the issue that comes across quite often, I would say, is that it gets a little bit hard when certain characters are on, like, or within the manga, because they start to look the same, and that's because a lot of the characters have the same face, which wouldn't be a bad thing, except for like the problem is that Lupin and Zenigata look very close to the same in some parts of this manga. I'm not going to show you, I'm only going to show you just like the very, very minimum of it. But I will say there are certain characters that will start to look the same. Maybe that's on purpose, maybe it's not, but I don't know. Like, some of the characters, like, yeah, it's like funny to see them, but there are definitely like times where faces will start to look the same, or characters will start to look the same, which is just like kind of odd, I guess is the best way to say it. Like right here, like, see, you can kind of tell who's like supposed to be like who, but you know, one of them is supposed to be Zenigata and one of them is supposed to be Lupin, but they kind of look nearly the same. They both have that kind of like chiseled look to them. Lupin looks like he has a butt chin, like within this, which is not necessarily true, because like if you look at here, he doesn't have one, but in like this part he does. So it's just a little bit confusing, a little bit odd, and I don't really know. Like, I wonder if Monkey Punch did that on purpose, to like make it that the characters are like important, but like they're not like meant to be drawn in a way that is charming, or it is charming, but like not in like necessarily a like pretty or like a nice way. Like, these people are like criminals and stuff like that. So I guess maybe that's like what he was trying to emphasize, but it's hard to tell if that's actually the case, or if like his character drawings just weren't as good. But I will say, his backgrounds and his vehicle designs are gorgeous. This guy knows how to draw vehicles. So if you don't want to see visuals of one of the stories I'm about to show, you can skip a little bit ahead. Yeah. So just looking at it here, like, this guy knows how to draw vehicles. Like, these cars are gorgeous. This background is so flipping cool. I think the use of the gray, like the gray wash, and this might have been in color, if not, like the crowd scene just looks really cool. I love the use of black here. It's just like this story and this manga is filled with that. This is just some of the issues can be like paneling as well. I think is kind of hard to keep track of. Like, it can get really messy in certain parts, but I think generally the art is pretty good. But I will say that, like, if you're not a big fan of that 60s 70s style, then yeah, you're not gonna like the art at all. But I think there is a reason to read, like, and look at the visuals as a figure of its time, because it's nice to see the history of manga, especially from the 60s until now, where it's really changed quite a bit. And I think that's like what is the merit that can be found in this. So this is something that, if you are a big manga history nerd, this is a must pick up, like, for sure. Like, this is something you definitely need to check out, and definitely something that I would suggest if you're looking to see like where manga started, or just to get an idea of like where a really popular franchise got its roots. However, if you're not a big fan of like the old school art, some of the very crass and poorly aged writing at some parts, then I would say stay away from this, just because like it is, it's a little bit pricier because you are paying for a hardcover. It's still pretty cheap for a hardcover. I mean, $24 is not super expensive, but it is something to keep in mind that, like, if you're limited on space or you're limited on money, then I would say, if any of those things seem unappealing to you, then I would say just stick with another series. I will say it's also important to note, because I just remembered now, but there are very explicit scenes of trigger warning here for sexual assault and for basically rape. So if you're triggered by any of those themes or those actions or events, then 100% you have to stay away from this, because there are I wouldn't say there's quite a few, but there is a decent amount, enough that it's warrant a talk about. So yeah, just something to keep in mind. So I know it seems very negative, like, or at least my thoughts seem very negative, but I think it's important to, like, see faults and stuff, even though you really like it. Because I actually really do like this specific, like, collection of stories. I still had a great time reading through all of it. I read through it very fast, and they're probably going to be rereading it soon. But it's definitely something, like, that I know I will enjoy, and I know that, like, some people that I know will enjoy, but I also do think there are people who are going to be like, nah, this is definitely not my thing. And that's totally okay. You know, you don't have to enjoy everything. I think that's important to note about any manga, really. Like, it doesn't matter if, like, 1 million people like it. You don't have to like everything that 1 million people like. So, yeah, that's going to be it for this volume, this episode of First Volume Impressions. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'm really excited. I feel pretty good about this one. I think I improved a little bit more than the first volume, or the first episode, because I know I had some issues with the first episode, and definitely people pointed it out, and I appreciate that, because, like, I just want to keep getting better, so yeah. If you liked this, please like, comment, and favorite, subscribe. I always appreciate it. I'm growing a lot faster than I actually expected at all, so it's just really cool to be able to see that much growth in such a short amount of time, and I really appreciate it, because you guys are awesome. And you guys keep me wanting to do this stuff. So yeah, let me know if you've also read this, because I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Yeah, like, comment, favorite, subscribe, and I will see you in the next episode of FVI, the First Volume Impressions.